Hey, Israeli baseball team, do it for us. You're chosen, for God's sakes.
We were proving to the world we belong here.
Hi, and welcome to our podcast, Conversations with B'nai B'rith. I'm CEO Dan Mariaschin. In this episode, I'll be chatting with Emmy-nominated filmmaker and CEO of Ironbound Films, Jeremy Newberger, together with his Ironbound partners, Seth Kramer and Daniel A. Miller. Newberger directed Israel Swings for Gold, a documentary that intimately follows the experiences of Israel's baseball team at the 2021 Tokyo Olympic Games, the team's first time competing at the Olympics. But first, just one note. If you enjoy this program, subscribe to Conversations with B'nai B'rith wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a rating. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us on Facebook for all of our latest content. Well, following the success of Heading Home, the tale of Team Israel, which it chronicled the Israel national baseball team's remarkable journey at the 2017 World Baseball Classic, Jeremy Newberger and his Ironbound film partners Seth Kramer and Daniel A. Miller were eager to continue the story. They envisioned a sequel capturing another improbable triumph. And wow, did they hit it out of the park. Due to the strict COVID-19 restrictions at the Tokyo 2021 Olympics, which prohibited media from the Olympic Village, Newberger and his team adopted a truly hands-off approach. What they did is they entrusted Israel's players with camcorders to document their own experiences in the village and during the games. The footage captured by players like former major leaguers Danny Valencia and Ryan Lavarnway became the foundation of Ironbound Films' documentary Israel Swings for Gold, directed by Newberger, Kramer, and Miller. The film tells the inspiring story of a team that entered the Olympics as serious underdogs. With only 6 countries allowed to compete in Tokyo, few believed that Israel would qualify, let alone contend for the gold. Yet, there they were, making history at their very first Olympic Games. With the team documenting their own journey, the film offers viewers a candid look at everything, from their flight to Japan, to teammates giving each other haircuts, to game footage capturing both their victories and defeats while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. I'm honored to welcome Jeremy Newberger, who is here to discuss Israel Swings for Gold and the Israeli national baseball team's remarkable journey filled with triumphs, struggles, and snubs. Jeremy Newberger is the CEO of Ironbound Films, a documentary and new media production company based in Garrison, New York. An award-winning Emmy-nominated filmmaker, producer, and director, Newberger previously served as a producer at MSNBC. Jeremy, thank you for being here. Really excited to talk to you today about the film.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Well, before we discuss the documentary and its prequel, Heading Home, tell us about your own life and work, and why create a documentary focused on Israel's baseball team?
So I grew up a conservative Jewish kid, Long Island, specifically Dix Hills in New York. My father, who's no longer with us, used to take me to Mets games. I think I wanted to be a Yankees fan, but he was worried about parking the car in the Bronx. So we ended up Mets fans. And I went to, Zionist sleepaway camp as a kid for most of my young life. And it was there that I met my co-director, Daniel Miller. We both went to the same sleepaway camp, as did another friend of ours named Jonathan Mayo, who writes for Major League Baseball. And the three of us have kind of been in touch, throughout our growing up and getting jobs. Dan and I became partners with another gentleman named Seth and been making films together. I think, we have just about a dozen films we've done together. And Jonathan went on to, become a reporter for prospects in Major League Baseball. So I guess I had the kind of basics of being Jewish American, being connected to Israel, and liking baseball. That was the fundamental building blocks necessary for making these movies.
Well, that's a great combination. So Israel's baseball team qualifies for the Olympics for the first time ever in 2021. What was going through your mind then? And what inspired you to create the documentary as a sequel to Heading Home, The Tale of Team Israel? Clearly, there's always a good story about Israel and about Israelis. And Israelis have competed in other Olympics and other sports. But baseball, we think of baseball as well, it's the American pastime, but it's also played in a number of other countries, which are very competitive. So what was going through your mind at that particular point?
I think, well, for starters, Heading Home, the film that sort of predates Israel Swings, it was the first Jewish film that Dan and Seth and I made together. Not to say that there wasn't a Jewish sensibility in previous films, but none of them were focused on Israel or Jewish issues. So when we came out with Heading Home and it was received so well, I mean, it played at 100 Jewish film festivals. It toured 13 cities in the country, and the crowds were on lines around the theater. It was so much fun that you just didn't want that fun to end. That is the real reason why we pursued doing a sequel. Not because it makes copious amounts of money, because documentaries just don't. I think that's why most sequels are made, for the money, but because of the fun factor. So when we finished Heading Home, we were in touch with Peter Kurz, the general manager of Team Israel, and he told us that he was putting together a team to try and qualify for the Olympics, and he wanted us to come and start filming as they went through their qualifying rounds. But it's too risky as a filmmaker. In case they don't qualify for the Olympics, you could spend a lot of money traveling to, Lithuania and Bulgaria and other countries filming a team that doesn't make it to the Olympics. So we watched sort of, with bated breath, hoping and rooting that they would make the qualifications for the Olympics, and then we would sort of marshal our forces for the sequel. So once they did that, that's when we came on board. It was a bumpy ride, though. Because, I mean, we're talking about the 2021 Olympics, and for all of the Gematria fans out there, you'll notice that it's an off year. It should be the 2020 Olympics. So something in the world must have happened that postponed the Olympics by a year, and that postponed our film by a year after we had started filming, which is never fun when trying to make a film. So it wasn't the first film, very easy to make. The second film, a lot of bumps in the road.
Well, you talk about 2021, and as you watch the documentary, clearly you see a lot of folks wearing masks because of COVID, and the stadiums were empty. So you kind of go back in time. It's not that long. All of us remembering what it was to live in the time of the pandemic. But before we go on to the film itself, just want to ask you about baseball. A baseball question as it relates to the team. So you've got former major league players, you've got former college players. How did they assemble their team to then move to a competitive situation where they're going to play in the Olympics?
So in order to be part of Israel's national team when it competes in like the tournament for, let's say, the World Baseball Classic, it just depends on your heritage. You just need to have like a Jewish parent or grandparent to show that you're sort of connected to being Jewish. In order to be an Olympic team or on an Olympic team, you have to be an Israeli citizen. So the kind of network of players that have circled Israel baseball, either to play in their Israel national team's attempts at the World Baseball Classic, or to coach their European leagues, or to be involved in the sort of failed league they tried to start in Israel, were all players that were sort of in the know that they wanted to keep playing with Israel. But then the ask had to go out for other players who were willing to become Israeli citizens in order to compete at the Olympics. So Peter has quite a network of scouts and players stateside that are kind of trying to recruit Jewish players of note who kind of pop into their radar. But I think after the success at the World Baseball Classic, there was more players that were sort of coming to them than them chasing, which is like a paradigm shift for Israel baseball. And I think culminated in the last World Baseball Classic, where even though Israel didn't do so well, they had Jock Peterson and more big league major league player names involved. So I think it's quite a testament to the Israel baseball crew that they were able to get all of these guys to become citizens, which is not like an easy decision to make. To become a dual citizen of another country, it's quite a step. But I think it also shows the commitment and what was driving these guys to be part of the team to make that commitment.
Well, there are more and more Jewish players each year. I see it. In fact, we're recording this program during baseball season, and the other night I think there was a first with the pitcher, the batter, and the catcher, who are all Jewish. Which we can name the Hank Greenbergs and the Sandy Koufaxes, but there are a lot of other folks who play the game. Now, just to go to the film, because no media were allowed in the Olympic Village. Players were given camcorders to record their own experiences. In fact, you see that at the beginning of the film. Everybody gets a brand new camcorder. What was that a big risk for you as a filmmaker, asking the subjects of a potential documentary to record themselves? Or were you excited to see what they would film and just go from there?
I mean, it's a huge risk. Here we are. I went to Israel with the team when they had to set up their bank accounts and take their medical tests to be qualified as Olympic players and have their citizenship ceremonies. We followed them on a tour through the East Coast minor league teams. They had set up matches right before leaving for Tokyo. And we were getting great footage. And all of a sudden, we came to a screeching halt where we were told, not only can you not, usually you can't film in Olympic Village, there's no press allowed, but also we couldn't go to the country. In the first film, I was bringing players outside of their hotels, taking them to dinner and interviewing them in order to get access in between the games. Here, I wasn't going to be able to do even that. So it was a huge risk. I think what was comforting to us was knowing that some of the players had very sort of good experience on social media and creating film or short films. We knew that there were a few, we'll call them cards in the deck, who could handle and manage getting good footage while embedding, with their team. I did not, in my wildest dreams, expect what we got when they gave us the footage. Nate Fish, who's the third base coach, I think he might be the biggest Spielberg on the team, and he was my sort of direct go-to as the Olympics were going on, where Dan and Seth and I would sort of be prompting him with, hey, we noticed this bed incident, which maybe we'll talk about in a little bit, that happens in the film. Or, we saw that, you have a big game against the US. If you guys lose, can you film the reactions? Or can you get in the locker room after a win? We were asking for things like that, but Nate was taking it even farther than our wildest dreams, as were the other players who were filming. I don't know of another film with this level of access to players who are in the middle of something. For sure, you can tell a story afterwards, but this film gives you a sort of fly on the wall access as it's happening. And you also never see sports figures be unguarded. Usually they'll come over to the press and they'll give you sort of their practiced, rehearsed bite. They're trained and media trained. This is unvarnished, sort of real emotions flying as they win and lose their way through the Olympics. And I think it was risk that paid off, to answer your question.
Well, it seemed like a pretty compatible group with all of the film that I watched during the documentary. They seemed to get along pretty well together. Where did you get your footage of the actual games? Which placed in the film is very exciting, almost winning that first game against South Korea, which would have been a giant win and a giant start for the Olympic Games for the team. So was this something that you picked up from outside?
Large amount of footage comes from the players filming. Then, there were sort of special events where they were watching screenings of the games. So we filmed that. Some footage recorded after the fact. But in the sort of post-production phase of a film, your focus is sort of on building the story using what you have and then augmenting with other footage that you can get access to. And I guess a good example of that is including Rabbi Sachs, who is the sort of spiritual voice in our film. We, in the sort of post-production phase, felt like the film needed a higher dimension or layer of commentary that can speak philosophically about what it means to lose in sports. And we came across Rabbi Sachs, whose commentary on just about everything is worth watching and fascinating. And that becomes a big part of the film. It kind of ties together some of the themes of losing in sports and what it means to pick yourself up off the ground after you lose, which I think is maybe the biggest message from the film.
Are you talking about the late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who was the former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom? And you also note that he was a sports fan. Mm-hmm. So that brings it together. And I think it was an excellent idea to bring him in. He had a lot to say about life and about the lessons of sports. I think it really worked well. Now, it's a tradition for Olympic teams to display their country's flag outside the building where they're staying. This was the first time since the 1972 Olympics in Munich that Israel hung a flag in that way. Beyond the physical act of putting up the flags, what did that represent symbolically? Not just to the Israeli baseball team, but the entire Israeli Olympic delegation, the state of Israel on the world stage, and beyond that, to Jews around the world.
So I think it's articulated by some of the players at the moment in the film, but the emotional impact of being able to fly the Israeli flag in the rooms that they were staying from the balconies. It's hard not to kind of harken back to Munich and the massacre that happened. And in fact, this was the first Olympics since Munich where the Olympics actually acknowledged the Munich massacre, which gave it even more meaning. But it certainly was touching for the players. I guess I would add to that when they come out in their uniforms with the Israeli flags, when they are part of the sort of march of the teams, just representing Israel on the world stage. It has so much meaning when you have kind of fought your whole career to succeed in your sport, and also you fought your whole life to succeed as a faith on equal footing in the world. So I think it was very important to the players to be able to do that, and some of them got very emotional when doing so. So I think you've sort of touched on a big theme for the team Israel is just that wearing Israel on your chest on the world stage means so much to them.
There was something else in the film that really touched me. There was a presentation of a team T-shirt to a young man who was a victim of terror, had been shot. This presentation, and I think his mother was sitting near him, was quite something. Tell us about that.
So we're traveling with Team Israel when they were in Israel. I think I mentioned before, sort of dotting I's and crossing T's ahead of the Olympics. That is getting their bank accounts set up and their citizenship papers, and they're passing the sort of health requirements of the Olympics. And while we were there, Team Israel was also sort of participating in kind of an outreach campaign to kind of make Israel aware of them as a team. You got to sort of remind the audience that baseball's not really a thing in Israel. Basketball and soccer are very much so. And they're very aware of their judo, athletes, as well as windsurfing, as we mentioned before. But baseball's really not a thing. So they had to do some outreach, and they wanted to do so in a way that kind of represented the sort of menshiness of the team. So they visited children in a hospital and, cancer ward. They went to a village with Israeli Arabs, and they did a whole bunch of sort of outreach in Renana at sort of middle schools, showing clinics to throw the ball around, answer kids' questions. And in their travels, they encountered a soldier who had been wounded by Hamas and was really in a difficult recovery period. And pitcher John Muscat, who may be one of the biggest mensches on the team, sits down with the soldier and offers him a bracelet and a shirt from the team, and it's a really authentic moment captured. It was I was in the room for it. It was quite extraordinary to see the soldier respond and squeeze his hand. It's a really hard moment to watch in the film without tearing up. Forget being Jewish, just like as a human being, and I think it's important to show so that the players, when they get back on the field, they know full well who they're representing, and the strife and struggles of being an Israeli. I think that they felt like that moment really kind of locked it in for them about what the purpose of what they were doing was.
The timing of this film really is quite fortuitous in terms of what Israel is facing today in so many different arenas. The Israeli players clearly made efforts to maintain a sense of normalcy both on and off the field, but they couldn't escape their identity as Israelis. And you portray this difficulty. Were you surprised by any of the bias and anti-Israel sentiment that they encountered, even during something as seemingly benign as pin trading? And that's a classic activity off the field for all Olympic athletes. They exchange pins. That's the whole idea. And you come back and you have a big collection of all kinds of from all kinds of countries. And you depict it really very well. But tell us about that part of being in Tokyo.
So you asked if I'm surprised. That was the first part of your question, and I was a little surprised. But I guess when we made the first film about Team Israel, we traveled to Israel and then followed them to Korea and Japan. And it's a smaller setting than the Olympics, the World Baseball Classic, but it's still pretty big over there. And I was surprised that there was no anti-Semitism encountered in the first film. I expect, the usual sort of animosity that comes with Israel traveling places, but Korea and Japan love the sport so much that they sort of appreciated the ambassadors of the sport, no matter where they're from. So when we started doing Israel Swings for Gold and the team was traveling in stadiums here stateside and protesters were showing up, with the same kind of chants and slogans that you hear since October 7th, the free Palestine and that kind of thing, it kind of clicked that this is a different paradigm, the Olympics, and there might be more experiences for these players once they get to Tokyo than we had experienced with them at the World Baseball Classic. And it manifested through a few different incidents while they were there. In addition to sort of this age-old custom of trading pins with different athletes and everybody wanting Israel's pins, they made a jokey video about jumping on the cardboard recyclable beds that were given to the athletes that blew up into an international incident. And only their video was sort of picked on, whereas athletes from other countries were all sort of joking around about these beds. So I think they experienced in this trip anti-Semitism that hadn't happened in the first film. And I think what's most surprising is, we made this film before October 7th. So the film has a lot of themes that become really relevant now that we didn't anticipate. That is experiencing the sort of protests as they went from minor league stadiums to stadiums with organized protesters who knew what to say and how to chant, and everything was sort of scripted for them, to interviewing the soldier you mentioned who was shot by Hamas terrorists, to the players being in country when missiles are landing from terrorist launch pads. All of that kind of works right now in the film as if we had planned a film post October 7th. And then maybe even the largest point is something I mentioned to you before about the theme of picking yourself off the ground after you lose, which the team experiences, through their losses in the Olympics. That's kind of a message that we need right now, after really suffering through one of the worst terror attacks in our lifetimes, followed immediately by anti-Semitism manifesting all over the country, and the world. So it's really bizarre to me, but this film has a feeling like it was made after October 7th, even though it was not, for all those reasons.
Well, yeah, you certainly can make analogies to what was experienced then, to what Israelis and American Jews are confronting today, and Jews around the world, not just here. Just to go back to Rabbi Sachs, though, in addition to the current crisis and situation we have, and how do we deal with all of this anti-Israel bias, again, to go back to Sachs, when you bring him in at various points in the film, what he has to say about faith and defeat, forgiveness, perseverance, also kind of connects to the everyday confrontations that not only the team experienced, but that we are experiencing as a people every day. So again, the timing is extremely important for Jews who are looking, and others, but friends of Israel, but Jews who are looking for some stories to kind of bolster their pride. And I think this film really does it. Just to go through what happened. So there's a loss to South Korea. There's a big win over Mexico, which you really feel like you were there. You just missed out on the opportunity for the bronze. Tell us a little about how it all finished.
I mean, if you watched the Olympic Games and now our film, you'll see that on paper how they did and what they experienced are kind of two different things. They lost to teams really badly in some cases, like mercy rule, where you after a certain amount of runs you call it, and against strong teams they almost won. I think in one game there was a dubious call from an umpire about a strike that could have cost them the entire game. And in another game, a ball grazes the sort of blousey shirt of the batter calling the game. So if you look on paper, you say, oh, they won against Mexico and lost every other, against everyone else, then it's not the same as the true story, which is there are two games that could have medaled them that they lost by dubious calls, and one victory. I think the fact that they made it to the 6 best teams in the world and played against the U.S. Really speaks volumes. And the sort of qualification run where they beat out against countries like Netherlands and and other European countries, it really points to Israel's growing franchise as the player levels are improving, as well as the fact that there were a bunch of Israeli players on this team. And I mean, everyone was an Israeli on the team because you had to be a citizen, but like Israeli Sabras born in Israel, like Shlomo Lipitz, one of the pitchers, or Tal Errol, or Asaf Loengard, who's playing for Rockland's team right now. So it's not just like American heavy hitters anymore, but they're starting to build from within and get Israeli players in the mix, natural born Israeli players. So it's incrementally getting better and better for baseball in Israel. I'm happy about that.
I know what you're saying, because just the fact, and as I'm watching this, you're playing, of course, Team USA, but the Dominican Republic, which is a baseball powerhouse, and not to mention South Korea. That's pretty exciting stuff. Even if you're in the game, win or lose, the fact is you're in the mix. And I think that that had a lot to do with the excitement, at least as a viewer, as one watches the film. So let's go fast forward a few years. We just talked about baseball, the game, and baseball in the Olympics. How devastating was it to find out that baseball wouldn't be included in the 2024 Paris Olympic Games?
Yeah, it was a bummer at the time for the players because you can't wait on ice for 8 years until the next, Olympics that you can play in when you're in your 30s, which a bunch of these players are. So players in that age bracket knew then and there they would not be at the next Olympics, which was disappointing because there's been momentum with Israel. They've performed well, with the exception of this last World Baseball Classic where they didn't have the greatest performance. Incrementally, Israel has been getting better and better in the world competitions. They just won the European Championship, by the way, one of their younger teams. And I think that it was disappointing for the kind of old guard. But I think they've pivoted from that disappointment. Since returning, they have found a new organization, Israel Baseball Americas, which is the American arm of the Israel Baseball Association. And what its purpose is to build a farm team system here in the States to acknowledge talent at the youngest levels of baseball and to start fostering them to put in through the system for Israel baseball. So Nate Fish, who I mentioned earlier, who's the third base coach, he and a bunch of the guys from the team are now doing clinics around the country for youth baseball, and they're trying to build a farm system so that Israel has, feeders of all the future Jewish talent that's out there, which is pretty extraordinary. And you know what? Numbers of people in the Israel Baseball Association have almost doubled since that first film I've made. There's 3 fields in Israel now instead of just 1. So it's going to take time, but it seems like incremental milestones is the way at it.
So now baseball comes back in 2028 in Los Angeles.
Yes.
Is there another sequel in store here?
It's a wait and kind of see. Again, it's so much fun not only making these films, but I'm showing the film right now. It's in theaters right now. We're playing at the New Plaza Cinema in New York City. We're on our 3rd week. They keep holding us over because of the crowds coming. So this Sunday we'll have another screening, and it's also been released digitally. It's so much fun to go out with the film and to bring players to Q&As and have people just sort of emotionally respond to, the moments in the film that really connect with them. That I do want to make another one. I don't know what the other one is.
No, I think that you have to do another sequel because really to represent the progress that you're talking about. There's one line toward the end of the documentary before Israel's game against the Dominican Republic that really stood out. And it was, after all the controversy, good games, bad games, politics, and hate, we were still there. To me, that feels like a metaphor for Israel and the Jewish people, don't you think?
Absolutely. And, we're sort of the official documentary unit for the team and how they feel and how they're sort of making their statement with their athleticism on the world stage. But then I take a step back, and us, Dan, Seth, and I are sort of representing Jewish storytellers who are also putting a flag in the ground and going out, with a film that has the word Israel in the title, in an environment that's not so welcoming for Israel right now. But I think it's an important thing to do, is to reclaim the narrative that's been sort of sullied these last 6 or 7 months, that, we have this democracy in the Middle East that's an ally of the United States, that it's the ancestral homeland of our faith and Jewish people, and that it's not only given so much to the world in terms of medicine and agriculture and culture, but it exists in all of the realms that the rest of the world are competing in the Olympics or participating in music, like Eurovision, and that we're not going to disappear. We're here to stay. And I think that message extends from the players and their experience to the filmmakers to Jews in general right now.
Well, beyond the physical act of raising the flag, what did this represent symbolically, not just to the Israeli baseball team, but to the entire Israeli Olympic delegation, the state of Israel on the world stage, Jews around the world? I think, and you've just talked about it, but for me as a viewer and as a Jew and as a Zionist, it was really a moment of proud Jewish identity. And I'm sure that the fans, when this was all over, the fans in Israel felt that this was a great accomplishment and there was a great deal of pride.
I mean, Israel doesn't think about baseball, but Israel loves the Olympics. So when baseball became the first team sport, to compete at the Olympics, it was something that they noticed. So I think we're not fully there yet with a full embrace of baseball in Israel, but I think there was pride that they were at the Olympics competing, and I think they'd love to see a repeat of that. And I think, like I said before, more and more the organization and Israel's baseball network is growing. It's going to be some years, though. They need more fields. They need little leagues. They need more coaches. It needs to become a thing. It hasn't become a thing yet. So I think there's always pride when the Israeli flag is representing Israel. Sometimes it's surprising to Israelis, like where it's representing them. But I think that there's definitely pride for this team. And I've seen it. I've seen, Israelis are usually the most surprised by these baseball films. I've had consulate, from the Israeli consulate come to a screening, and at the beginning of the screening, they're very, I don't really care about baseball. At the end, they're teary-eyed and they say, I really get it. So I think it's just sort of a mission that Israel baseball has, and to a large degree, Dan, Seth, and I have at Ironbound.
Not only that, I know that buying a team cap, that was among Jewish baseball fans, that was a big deal. A lot of caps were sold at that time as a measure of pride. Final question. What are you and your colleagues working on now?
So we've been pretty focused with these two baseball films on the intersection between American Jews and Israel. And we came across a project, non-baseball, that kind of is in the same territory, and it's fascinating to us. It's about Mickey Marcus, who I think probably viewers over the age of 60 might know who that is. Definitely underneath that age, probably not. But to give you the sort of short bio of him, this is a kid from Brooklyn. He was a boxer. He goes to West Point Military Academy, and he rises through the ranks in the American military to the rank of colonel, and is involved in everything from creating the surrender papers for Japan after World War II to picking the legal team at Nuremberg, like a really accomplished colonel in America. And he gets tapped by David Ben-Gurion in 1948 to come over to Palestine, which it was then, and to put the army together because it was all disparate groups. And he does it. And he's able to create a bypass road that stops the siege of Jerusalem and helps them win the War of Independence. This is an amazing figure that probably should be known by everyone. And there's so much to it about the enduring relationship between American Jews and Israel that it couldn't be more timely. So we've already started production on it. They do an annual ceremony for him at the West Point Military Academy in May every year, which we filmed. And now we're sort of fundraising and shooting simultaneously. But I'm hopeful to have that film done in a year from now.
Well, that's a great story. And as you said, for people over 60, they know the name, but new generations do not. I think it's such a great idea, a great contribution to understanding Israeli history, Jewish history, the history of American Jews who contributed to the building of the state of Israel. And we wish you luck and keep us posted about its progress.
Will do. Thanks, Dan.
Well, Israel Swings for Gold recently premiered at the New Plaza Cinema in New York City. It's also been screened at the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival. The documentary is now available to stream on Apple TV, Amazon Prime, YouTube Movies, and more. You can learn more about the film, co-directed by Jeremy Newberger, at ironboundfilms.com. Jeremy, thank you again for discussing Israel Swings for Gold and sharing insights about the Israeli baseball team's unique experiences at the 21 Tokyo Olympic Games. We're thrilled that you could join us, and we wish you continued success with the film and beyond.
Thank you so much.
Well, this concludes another great episode of the Conversations with B'nai B'rith podcast. Thank you to my guest, Jeremy Newberger, and to you for tuning in to our show. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Share this episode with others, post about it on social media, or leave us a comment or rating. For all of our latest content, and if you haven't already, follow or subscribe to Conversations with B'nai B'rith wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us on Facebook. Stay tuned for more exciting content in our next episode. Until then, for my guest, Jeremy Newberger, this is your host, Dan Mariaschin. Take care, everyone.